So, hello, can you all hear me loud and clear? Please, if you can hear me, type on the comment section that you can hear me. So today we're going to be looking at Module 5. Module 5 talks about process requirements, and we have looked at general requirements, we have looked at structure and governance requirements, we have looked at resource requirements, and today we're going to be looking at process requirements. Now, there are 5 major requirements of the ISO 15189-2022. We have also looked at quality manual on the slide same. So we are going to look at process requirement for today. So now process requirement is captured in the clause 7 of the ISO 15189-2022. So you must learn to get conversant with these clauses and their requirements, and also learn to appropriate these into the strategic document that is being used in your lab or that should be developed in your lab for the full implementation of the ISO 15189. So other process requirements, we have the pre-examination process. We have under this, we have the laboratory information for patients and users. We have requests for providing laboratory examination. We have the primary sample collection and handling. We have sample transportation, sample receipts, pre-examination handling, preparation, and storage. We also have the examination process. And under the examination process, we're going to be looking at verification of examination method, validation of examination method, evaluation of measurement uncertainty, biological reference interval, and clinical decision limits. We also have documentation of examination procedure. We also have ensuring the validity of the examination results. And we'll look at IQC, EQA, and comparability of the examination results. Then also we have the post-examination process. Under this, we look at the reporting of results, general result review and release, critical result report, special consideration for results. We'll look at automated selection, review, release, and reporting of results. Then we'll look at requirement for reports, additional information for report, the amendment of the reported results. They also look at post-examination handling of samples. They will look at non-conforming work for 7.5. They will look at 7.6, control of data and information. They will look at 7.7, complaints, and 7.8, continuity and emergency preparedness planning. So these are what and more we are going to be covering under the process requirements. Now, by way of introduction, the laboratory shall identify potential risks to patients in pre-examination, examination, and post-examination. Now, the identified risks and effectiveness of the mitigation process shall be monitored and evaluated for potential harm to the patient. The laboratory shall identify opportunities for improvement of patient care, develop a framework that will capture and manage this opportunity. So we all know that the process, the laboratory process is divided into 3 major aspects: the pre-analytical, analytical, and the post-analytical. So under the process requirement, the pre-analytical is looked at, the analytical is looked at, and the post-analytical, the non-conforming work and non-conforming work and complaints and continuity for emergency preparedness. So this is what forms the process requirement. Now, let's look at the pre-examination, which is also known as the pre-analytical. Now, it is necessary for you also to understand that the lab shall have a procedure for all the pre-analytical activities that may be applicable and are accessible to the relevant personnel. So every aspect of your pre-analytical has procedures from sample collection to sample preparation, sample transportation, sample management, and everything. There must be what a procedure for those activities. Now, pre-examination can influence the outcome of the intended result. We know that the quality of the input determine the quality of the output. So it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't put together your pre-analytical department, definitely there's a high level tendency that your analytical department are going to have issues. Now, from research, it has been seen that over 65% to 70% errors that happen at the lab happen at the pre-analytical stage. So the pre-analytical stage is not a leftovers for some set of laboratorians, technicians, or phlebotomists. No, it should be covered because the lab process actually starts from the pre-analytical, and it's a chain reaction. A chain reaction. So it's a one process leads to the other process, and other process leads to the other process for the final result of the patient. So there should be proper detailed information on the sample collection and transportation. Now, the ISO 20658 provide detailed information on sample collection and transportation, and likewise others. Now, the laboratory shall have appropriate information available for its user and patient. So, the information shall be sufficiently detailed to provide laboratory user with comprehensive understanding of the laboratory scope of activities and requirements. Now, so you in this aspect, to fulfill this aspect, you can have a lab handbook, laboratory handbook that will have the location of the lab, the operating hours, the contact information, procedure for requesting and collection of samples, the scope of the laboratory activities, turnaround time, the availability of advisory service, requirement for patient consent, factors known to significantly impact the performance of the examination. So whatever you know that will affect the test can be captured in those lab handbook. The application of result, the laboratory complaint process, and etc. So this laboratory information should be available to the patient and to the users. The users could be in the clinician, the hospital, or whoever that patronizes or seek the services of the lab. Remember, when we say SHA, it means that it's compulsory. So when the document, whenever you hear the word SHA in the ISO 151 standard, it means it is compulsory. So the laboratory shall have appropriate information available for its users and its patients. And this information should include the laboratory operating hours, the contact information, the procedure, how all samples are collected, type of bottles, turnaround time, the availability of advices, requirement for patient consent, and etc. Now, 7.23 talks about request for providing laboratory examination. So each lab request accepted by the lab for testing shall be considered as an agreement. So the examination result shall provide sufficient information to ensure that there is traceability of the patient to the request and the sample. It must cover the identity and the contact information of the person requesting the test. Then identification of the examination requested. So what kind of test is being requested? Informed clinical and technical advice and clinical interpretation can be provided. Now, the test request information may be provided in a format or a medium that is deemed appropriate by the lab and accepted by the user. So now, where necessary for patient care, the laboratory shall communicate with users or their representative to clarify the user's request. So when they are requesting for test, each request that you accept, that standard requisition form, it should be regarded as for an agreement between the patient or the user and the lab. Now, the test requested shall provide sufficient information. They need to know the type of sample, if it's some historic where the sample site is collected, which part of the site or the contact of the person requesting, the clinician or the hospital, and the patient of the test that is requested. So that there was a day sometime someone wrote a request and sent to the lab, and it was written C for cat, X for saxophone, arrow for reaction. So CX arrow. And the person in the lab was not thinking, what test is this? What test is this? Started thinking, what test is this? And yeah, look, what kind of test is this in the lab? Now, when she called me, CSRO, I said, oh, that is chest X-ray. And so that is not basic laboratory test, it's more of radiology test. Why? Because there was no clarity in the request. So this has to be captured as appropriate as possible. Now, for oral request, when the lab shall have a procedure for managing oral request, let's say, for example, you work in the hospital, you have a hospital, let's say it's a call is made to the lab, and so we want you to add calcium to that test, or we want to add we want to add a particular test request to that. So you should have a way of documenting it, way of capturing it, and confirm both the time. If applicable, you should include provision of document confirmation of the examination request to the lab within that given time. Am I communicating? And can you hear me loud and clear? Sorry, I'm not shouting much today or being loud. Please, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can hear you, sir.
Okay, okay, it's fine. Just type on the comment section. Ask any questions. Okay, thank you. Now let's talk about primary sample collection and handling. So you must have a documented procedure for sample collection and SOP for sample collection. Let's say sample for like venipuncture, blood culture collection, some other special techniques, semen collection, all these things. You should have what? An SOP that addresses what? Sample collection. The laboratory shall have procedure for collection and handling of what? Primary samples. Information shall be available to those responsible for what? Sample collection. Now, the standard say any deviation from the established collection procedure shall be clearly recorded. Potential risk and impact on the patient outcome and acceptance or rejection of the sample shall be assessed. Recorded and shall be communicated to the appropriate personnel. And it is expected that you periodically review the requirement for sample volume, the collection device, preservatives applicable to ensure that there is neither insufficient or excess amount of sample that is collected from the patient for a particular analysis. So the information of the pre-collection activities. So the laboratory should establish information and instruction for pre-collection activities with sufficient details to ensure that the integrity of the sample is not compromised. So there are things that should be done before a particular sample is being collected. Now, those things, those information has to be provided, those instructions has to be provided to those who are coming for the test, or for those who are going to collect them. There are some tests that are being collected, some samples are collected and sent to the lab, and the patient needs to make some preparation before coming to the lab. So whatever be the procedure, the lab shall provide information and instruction for pre-collection activities with sufficient details. Let's say, for example, now you are telling the patient to come for a semen analysis. You should be able to tell him the days of absence, how long the period the person must abstain, or what he needs to do to be able to get the sample, or how long the sample should get to the lab from the time of collection and everything. Those things have to be clearly stated to the client, or the client will go and do something else. So the lab shall include preparation for patients, so instruction to caregiver, sample collector, patient, clinicians, or whoever that collect the sample. This preparation of the patient must be communicated to the patient. The type and the amount of primary samples to be collected with description of the containers has to be well spelled out to the person. Sometimes we want to use color. Oh, use green cap, use yellow cap. But sometimes a vacuum green cap is different from a tin bottle uh, green cap. So you must help them to specify the type of bottle. Maybe you could call the anticoagulant name or ask the kind of person what kind of bottle are you using to collect the sample and state those things clearly where relevant to order for sample collections. Special timing of collection. Let's say what particular time the sample needs to be collected has to be stated so that you don't go and collect a sample that is fasting at random time. It won't give you the desired result. Provision of clinical information relevant to or affecting the sample collection. So there should be what provision for what there should be clinical information. Some of from patient in the hospital they like to just get a sheet of paper, write John Paul, write EUC sign on that. That is not a request. Sample labeling. Please mute your mic. Sample labeling. Sample labeling. Sample labeling for unequivocal identification of patient, as well as the source and the site of the sample and label. Sample must be properly labeled. Now,
This birthday today, enter your brain well.
please do well to be conscious of your mic and mute your mic, please. Now, sample labeling for unequivocal identification of the sample, as well as source and site of sample, and labeling when several samples from the same patient are to be collected, including multiple pieces of tissue or slide. Now, in sample collection, there's what we call order of draw. Those order of draw tells you the sample that should be collected first. If you don't know that, go and read it up. Order of draw of samples. So there are samples that should be collected first before some samples. Let's say, for example, you have, let's say, patient is doing multiple tests. You have to collect lithium heparin, blood culture. You have to collect fasting, sodium citrate. You have to collect fluoride oxalate, EDT, and the rest. What bottle should be collected first? That's what is called order of draw. So go and read about that if you don't know that. Now, if it's the phlebotomy technique, the laboratory criteria for acceptance or rejection of sample has to be well spelled out. So in other words, you must have a policy. You must have a policy for what? You must have a procedure or a manual for sample rejection and sample rejection criteria. Order of draw. Typing it there. Order of draw. Phlebotomy technique. Phlebotomy procedure. Call it order of draw. Type it in the comment section. Order of draw. Order of draw sample collection. Now, laboratory criteria for acceptance and rejection must also be spelled out. In other words, you must have a sample rejection criteria. And you must also have a sample rejection log. That sample rejection log is to help to document what the sample that is rejected. And some of the characteristics is that you have to write the type of sample, the reason why the sample was collected, the reason why the sample is rejected, who reject the samples, and date and time where applicable as part of what this as key major aspects of the content of a sample rejection log. Sample rejection criteria is the procedure. Sample rejection log is template used in recording sample rejection, and the record is the one that has already been filled, that has already been documented. Is that clear? Okay, let's talk about patient consent. Patient consent is addressed in 7.2.4.3. So, who is going to read for us? One person, mute your mic and read this. Unmute your mic and read this. And tell us what you understand by this.
Okay.
Yes. Go ahead. Who is helping us out? So raise up your hand and I'll call you. 7.2.4.3. Yes, I'm waiting. Okay. Good. David, please read for us. Please go ahead. Hello, go ahead. Okay. If he or she is not there, please can someone read again? Someone else. Please, let's be fast. We have a lot to cover this night.
Emery, the laboratory shall obtain the informed consent of the patient for all procedures carried out on the patients. Note, for most routine laboratory procedures, consent can be inferred when the patient willingly submits to the sample collecting procedure, for example, vein puncture. 2. Special procedures, including more invasive procedures or those with an increased risk of complication to the procedure, may need a more detailed explanation and, in some cases, recorded consent. 3. If obtaining consent is not possible in emergency situations, the laboratory may carry out necessary procedures provided they are in the patient's best interest.
Yeah. So, can you explain what that means?
Yes, they are trying to tell us that we should get the consent of the patients that we want to collect sample from. But there may be situations whereby, in case of emergency, we might carry out the laboratory procedure if the patient is in cannot give the consent at that time at the patient's best interest. That's all I can say.
So what document needs to be put in place?
SOP. There should be SOP for. Or what do you ask? What's the question?
What are the
Hello?
documentation? What are the documentation that should be put in place to achieve this?
Okay. There should be a manual for sample collection. Then there should be patient consent form for this, so that if patients comes, they will fill the consent form, which will be recorded and documented.
Now, if you look at it, not all procedures require patient consent form, but for those that require, they should have a patient consent form. Then the consent form should be filled along
Yeah.
like some or do genetic testing, like HIV counseling, and the rest. Those consent forms should be filled. Okay. Now, instruction for collection of samples. Yeah, we are looking at for you to ensure accurate sample is being collected and stored. The laboratory should have instructions on how to identify a patient for whom a primary sample is collected, how to verify the relevant and record the patient's needs, to record the patient information that meets the pre-examination. Like, let's say, for example, fasting status if the person has taken a medication. Let's say, for example, like you are doing INRO, if the patient on caffeine, maybe you are doing fasting liquid or fasting blood sugar, and the patient, when was the patient last evening, you did fasting, sample collection at predetermined time of interval, let's say 2 hours postprandial, that you need to collect 2 hourly. So those things have to be put into consideration. You have to have a way to, you have to have a procedure. Now, why do we need to say you have to have instruction? Why do you have to have a procedure? So that everybody within the system don't do it the way they know or the way they feel. They will do it in accordance to the standard requirement. Are we communicating? So that's the essence of having instruction. That's the essence of having procedures. That's the essence of having a manual, one of the essence of having it. So that people follow the instruction so that we can get the desired result. That's the reason why they have to read it, acknowledge it, and they have to also be trained on it where necessary. Record the identity of the person collecting the primary sample and collection date, and when relevant, record the collection what. Requirement for separating or dividing the primary sample when necessary. All these are the instructions you have to have. You can have them as SOPs, you can have them as manual or work instruction. Tabulation and proper storage condition before collected samples are delivered to the laboratory, and safe disposal of the material used in collection process. You must have the procedures for disposing of your needles, sharps, and everything. This talks about 7.25 talks about transportation. So to ensure that timely and safe transportation of samples, the laboratory shall provide instruction for packaging of samples for transportation. How many of you know about triple packaging? How many of us know about triple packaging, or what is triple packaging? If you know about triple packaging, you can tell us more. What is triple packaging? Hello? What is triple packaging?
Okay, sir, can I attempt that question?
Go ahead.
Okay, sir. So triple packaging from my context will be, I'll just paint a scenario. Say just like the name implies, it's a packaging that requires three layers of packaging for the samples to be transported. So let's say, for instance, you are transporting samples from point A to point B. And then if it is a plasma sample or whatever sample it is, you first of all have a first packaging, which in this case will be the specimen container, whether an EDTA, a plain tube or whatever. And then that's your first packaging. Then your second packaging will be, a box, maybe a cryo box, for instance, if you're using cryo vials. So you can now use cryo box as your second packaging, where the cryo vials will be inside of the box and then it is closed. And then the third packaging will now be, the box, the cryo vial inside the box, and then the cryo vial inside the cryo box, and the cryo box a um inside what do you call it? It could be a cooler, for instance, or a vaccine carrier, or a Zablo box. That will now be your third packaging. So just like it implies, three layers of packaging for a particular sample type. That is what is true packaging. Thank you. And over. Was I heard or something? Was I heard? I can't
Yes,
hear anything.
yes, we heard you. Or I heard you. So, simple packaging refers to a packaging system used to transport and store infectious samples, including biological agents and patient specimens. The system consists of 3 layers of packaging. So, we have the primary receptacle, like leak-proof containers or absorbent material used to package the first one. They're like, we have the second packaging, like leak-proof bag or container to package it. Then we have now like the outer packaging, like the rigid outer packaging. So those are what is known as simple packaging. Those are the way you transport infectious um no, those are the way you transport infectious substances or biological agents when you are transporting them. The packaging of sample for transportation, you have to have instruction. So all the way you package sample, you must have an SOP or packaging of samples. Ensure the time between collection and the receipt in the lab appropriate for request time is within the time. There are some tests that is time bound. So between the time you are packaging it and time that you deliver to the lab for analysis, then you should ensure that the TAT has not been the time has not elapsed. But if it elapsed, then we will not have issues with the sample and integrity of the sample will be questioned. Maintain the temperature interval specified for sample collection. Now, there are some samples that need to go on dry ice. How many of us have heard about dry ice? Or how many of us have seen a dry ice before? Or what is a dry ice? Hello, what is dry ice? Okay. Dry ice is a solid form of CO2, which is created by compressing and cooling the CO2 until it liquefies, and then reduce the pressure to allow the liquid to expand and freeze into small white platelets or blocks. Am I communicating? So it's a form of CO2 that is converted to ice. Now, those things are used to transport samples that need to go on frozen state. Am I communicating? Please, if you can hear me loud and clear or you understand what I'm saying, please type on the comment section. Yes. But look as if we are speaking Greek here. Okay, yeah, thank you. So if the integrity of a sample has been compromised and there is a healthy risk, the organization responsible for that transport of that sample shall be notified immediately and action should be taken. Laboratory shall establish and periodically evaluate the adequacy of the sample transportation. So you have been transporting a sample, let's say from your lab to the preparer lab. You have to periodically evaluate the adequacy of your transportation of your sample transportation. So sample receipt. Now there should be a sample receipt procedure. How do you receive your sample? Laboratory shall have a procedure for sample receipt that includes unequivocal traceability of the sample by the request and labeling to a unique identified patient and when applicable to also the anatomical site, cases of histologies or some other form of testing. So next, criteria for acceptance and rejection of samples must also be there. Record date and time of the receipt of the sample when relevant. You have to record the identity of the person receiving the sample when relevant. Evaluation of received sample by authorized personnel to ensure compliance with the acceptability criteria relevant for the requesting testing. Instruction for samples specifically marked as urgent. So all your urgent samples, You should have a procedure for receiving them, which include details of special labeling, transport, rapid processing method, turnaround time. So there should be a TAT for your urgent samples and special reporting criteria to be followed. Ensure that all portion of the sample shall be unequivocally traceable to the original sample, including aliquots. Okay, 7.2.6.2 talks about sample acceptance exceptions. So you should have a procedure that considers the best interest of the patient in receiving care when a sample has been compromised due to what? Either incorrect patient or sample identification, sample instability, incorrect storage, inappropriate container, insufficient sample volume. When a compromised clinical criteria or irreplicable sample is accepted, let's say, for example, now a sample is collected, let's say a CSF sample, and maybe there be one or two mistakes, something like that. Now, and you now say, okay, because of the health care, because of the health condition of the patient, or because of the safety, or because of one or two things, the lab is deciding to accept that sample. The final report, that means your result now, shall indicate the kind of problem and where applicable that the result should be used with what? Caution when interpreting the result, because some of those things can affect the sample. Let's say, for example, now a blood sample was collected from a baby, and that baby, there is no maybe a day-old baby, and the rest, and they have collected enough samples from baby, and that's what they could get. So that insufficient sample can affect the outcome of the result. If the clinician say, okay, please, we can't get it, just try use it, and that is documented, that should also be stated in the report. So that they treat that result with caution. Am I communicating? Think talk about pre-examination. 7.27 talks about pre-examination handling, preparation, and storage. The sample protection. The laboratory shall have procedures for appropriate facility for securing patient sample, ensuring sample integrity, and preventing loss or damage during handling and preparation or storage of the samples. Criteria for additional examination requests. The doctor, the clinician, the patient wants to add a test to a sample that's already in the lab. You should have a procedure to address that. Sample stability. Concerning stability of the analyte in primary sample, the time between the sample collection and performing of the examination shall be specified and monitored where relevant. Now, look at some notes as it concerns the pre-examination process. Pre-examination is also known as the pre-analytical. It's divided into the pre-analytical and the pre-analytical. You should have a pre-analytical manual, SOP that can address each procedure required. SOP for sample transportation. Should have patient consent form, a standard requisition form. It could be in manual, it could be electronically, a lab handbook, templates and records for each activities at the pre-examination phase. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's look at 7.3, the examination process. Can someone read for us? Read 7.3 as you can see on the screen. Okay. I'll be calling names now. Omoike Ofure, please read 7.3 for us. Please, please read 7.31 for us. Can you all hear me? Yes, I can.
I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear
Okay.
myself. I have a feedback mic, so please read.
Okay. 7.3.1 Examination processes. Laboratory shall select and use examination methods which have been validated for their intended use to assure the clinical accuracy of the examination for patient testing.
Okay, hold on. So what do you think this thing is saying? Okay, just continue. Go ahead. We'll talk about it later. Go ahead. Read.
Note, preferred methods are those specified in the instructions for use of in vitro diagnostic medical devices, or those that have been published in established or authoritative textbooks, peer-reviewed texts or journals, or in international and national consensus standards or guidelines, or national or regional regulations. The performance specifications for each examination method shall relate to the intended use of that examination and its impact on patient care. Thirdly, all procedures and supporting documentation, such as instructions, standards, manuals, and reference data relevant to the laboratory activities, shall be kept up to date and be readily available to personnel. Personnel shall follow established procedures, and the identity of persons performing significant activities in examination processes be recorded, including point-of-care operators. Authorized personnel shall periodically evaluate the examination methods provided by the laboratory to ensure they are clinically appropriate for the request received.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Now, somebody read 7.32. Verification of examination method. Read and tell us what does this mean to us in the lab. Okay, let me call someone. Okay, Aruna, Geraldine, Aruna.
Hello, good evening. No. Hello, good evening. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Go on. Good evening. Good evening. Please go on.
Okay. 7.3.2 Verification of examination method. The laboratory shall have a procedure to verify that it can properly perform examination methods before introducing into use by ensuring that the required performance as specified by the manufacturer or method can be achieved. The performance specification for the examination method confirmed during the verification process shall be those relevant to the intended use of the examination results. Then 3, the laboratory shall ensure the extent of verification of examination methods is sufficient to ensure the validity of results pertinent to, I can't see the, okay, to clinical decision making. Then 4, personnel with the appropriate authorization and competence shall review the verification results and record whether the results meet the specified requirements. 5, if a method is revised by the issuing body, the laboratory shall repeat verification to the extent necessary. The following records of verification shall be retained. 1, performance specification to be achieved. 2, results obtained. 3, a statement of whether the performance specifications were achieved, and if not, sorry, I cannot see the last part of it.
Actions should be taken. So from what you read, what do you understand by this clause?
Okay, from the clause, we are meant to verify the methods that we're using to analyze our samples. For example, let me use chemical pathology as an example. For random blood sugar, we have a glucose oxidase method, which some of us use, either manually with a semi-automated machine or fully automated machine. The procedure that the manufacturers have in their inserts, we use our control, either the commercially prepared control that we use in the lab. We use it to run the test for like maybe 10 runs or thereabout. Then we calculate the precision, the accuracy, bias, and so on, and find out if it's in agreement with what we have in the product inserts. So whatever the values that are obtained, we are meant to document them, then analyze the results, and now state whether they meet the performance specifications. That's what I understand from this method.
Okay.
Then in case there's a change in the method, for another example, let's assume we have a method where we do glucose measurement of 1,000 mils to 10 microliter, and you want to change it either because of one thing or the other, or maybe the sample volume will not be enough for the test. You now decide to reduce it to 500 microliter and 5 microliter. So you have changed the original method. So if you want to start using this reduced volume, you still have to go back to do verification before you can start using it fully. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your input. Now, please listen. Thanks for the input. Now, the laboratory shall have a procedure to verify that you can properly perform an examination method before introducing to use. So, in other words, thou shalt not use any kit, any method, any process until it is being verified for patient use. That's what it means. So when you use an equipment or a test kit to run any patient sample without verification, it is a what? A non-conformity. Just as the way we have also established here that you cannot run a sample, a test without accuracy, without your internal quality control. So the laboratory, so when you are doing your verification, it must be extensive to cover what? All the clinical decision areas. Let's say, for example, now you are doing a validation for glucose. Now let's use that glucose now you made mention about. We try to validate that method on an equipment. Once you know there is normal level, there's abnormal low, abnormal high, and there are critical values. Critically abnormally high, critical value, and very, very high value. So your validation must be extensive to cover those areas. Low, critical low areas, normal, abnormal, critical high, high, and very, very high values. That's That's an example of laboratory shall ensure the extent of verification or examination is sufficient to ensure validity of the pertinent to clinical decision making. That's why when you don't provide sufficient verification, before those things are authorized, they will tell you, go and get more samples that cover these areas, or go and get materials that cover this area. But first, you must establish a documented procedure on how you need to do your validation. Validation and verification is another topic on its own. It's another thing about its own, another topic and training on its own. Now, but when we're talking about validation, we are using an unknown method. We're using a known method or a known method or a known substance to check an unknown method. That is what validation is all about. Using what a known process to check what an unknown process. So you cannot validate with something that is not validated. I don't know if you are getting me. Let's say, for example, now you have a procedure or a method that has been validated, and you're getting a new test kit. You can validate that new test kit with the new test kit with the already validated test kit to see if the performance of that test kit actually meets the requirement before you use it for patient. Now, let's say, for example, now there's also an expansion. Or you have been using, let's say, PCR equipment for COVID testing, and you decide to now start to use that for HIV viral load, and or let's say for Lassa fever testing. You can't just buy reagents and just start using it. You have to verify, you have to validate before you start using patient sample. So it's a commandment. Thou shalt not use any method, any equipment until it has been validated. Our validation is not just running about 10 samples. For quantitative testing, you will need to validate me up, and we have to be greater than 20. Because for statistical relevant purpose, if it's not greater than 20, then for quantitative testing, statistical analysis cannot start through. Am I communicating? So the validation process you have to document it, etc. Validation results, you have to document it. The validation report and even the raw data, you have to keep them to ensure that validation report is a proof that the validation was actually done. Am I communicating? The MU is measurement uncertainty. Quantity values shall be evaluated, maintained for the intended use, where relevant. Now, the MU shall be compared against performance specified and documented. Now, if you look at the ISO 20914, provide detailed activities on how to go about MU. But MU evaluation shall be regularly reviewed. It could be yearly, it could be 2 yearly. Now, for examination procedure where evaluation of MU is not possible or relevant, the rationale for exclusion of the MU estimation shall be documented. So, like some of those qualitative testing, which may not be applicable in MU, you have to state them. MU information shall be made available to the laboratory users on request if they ask. When users have inquiry on MU, laboratory response shall take into account other sources of uncertainty, such as but not limited to biological variations and etc. MU shall be taken into consideration when performing verification or validation of a method when relevant. For examination with qualitative testing, MU in intermediate measurement step for accuracy results, which produce quantitative data, shall also be considered for key high-risk part of the process. So, method MU For every measurement, there's a level of uncertainty. So this MU measures the quantity value to be evaluated. So you have to do the MU. Now, when the MU is, you document it for that analyte, measurement certainty for that analyte, and you have to keep it. It's part of what the requirement by the ISO 151. Now, biological reference screening intervals are clinical decision limit. You should have your reference range as a document. And this reference range should also be inserted in your report and clinical decision making by communicating. So you should have what? Your biological reference range for every test in a document. And also put it, because without the biological reference range, the result is not complete. Yes, it's not complete. So the reference range also gives a lot of meaning to that. Now, 7.36 talks about documentation of examination procedure. All the procedures, all shall be properly what? Documented by the laboratory personnel. And they are available in appropriate location. Are we communicating? All information when the laboratory makes a validated change to a method could affect the interpretation of the result. The implication of this shall be explained to user. When there's any change of the process, it has to be explained to the user. The laboratory shall document its examination procedure to extent necessary to ensure consistent application of its activities and validity of its result. Can somebody give me 3 examples of an examination procedure that must be documented by the laboratory personnel in the examination procedure? 3 procedures that there are many, any 3 procedures that should be documented. Okay. Over to you, Mr. John.
Okay, so procedures that should be documented in the lab, in the examination procedures, things like maintenance, calibration, and your QC protocols will need to be documented.
Okay, IQCs, quality control, your calibration, including even your reagent usage. They are part of what? Your examination procedures. All action that is taken, including all action that is taken within the examination during the testing procedures has to be documented. So these activities has to be documented. And if they must be documented, there must be a template for documentation, and there must be a procedure for it, or a protocol for it, or an instruction for use for it, whatever you choose to way to communicate it, but it has to be communicated, read and well understood by the end users, and also be trained by not the end user, by the laboratory personnel to ensure that they are appropriately done. Documentation is very key when it comes to quality management system. A lot of us, we have a lot of procedures we do, and we even do them rightly, but there are no documentation, there are no templates, there are no records to show that we actually do them. So these are the burdens, or this is the demand of quality, that you document, create documents, create procedures, create templates, and document on those templates to have the appropriate record, and check if those things are actually meeting the necessary need of the demand. So we check for effectiveness of what is being done. So let's look at 7.3.7, ensuring the validity of the examination results. So how do we prove that our result is valid? So the lab shall have a procedure for monitoring the validity of the result. Now, the monitoring shall be planned and has to be reviewed. So the laboratory shall have IQC procedure. Every test must have an IQC what? Procedure. And we're communicating. Then you have to do lot-to-lot verification when there's a change of lot. Then the use of third-party IQC material can be considered. It's also help to strengthen. Monitoring of interpretation of opinions can be achieved through regular peer review of the examination process. IQC is very well. Every procedure, including your malaria testing, including your urinalysis, must have what? An IQC program. That is the practice. That is what is standard for anything out of that. It's abracadabra. In quotes, if you understand that language, you don't understand it's error, it's a non-conformity, or it's a guesswork. And every guesswork is a what? Non-conformity. So these are characteristics of a good IQC. As you can see, look at the screen. Read, everybody read in your mind, read what you can see on the screen. I'll give you 2 minutes to read what you have on the screen. Read and digest all what I just spoke about on the IQC. This is what it is. So this is when you are just selecting an IQC material. These are the things you need to be looking at. Standard quality control material. Not how cheap it is, not who's going to borrow you. So these are the criteria for a good IQC program. Okay, thank you. So 7.3.7.3 talks about external quality assessment, which is EQA. So you shall establish a procedure for your EQA enrollment, listing, participation, performance, and how to review your EQA. These 4 things, you should have a procedure for how to enroll, how to participate, how to do it, how to perform the EQA, and how to review the EQA. Now, including your POCT, your point of care testing must also have EQA program. That's what the new standard says. Now, we all know what is EQA. And when doing an EQA program, it should not be done like the way, some of our lab, we have EQA specialists. When it comes to EQA, someone will come out, maybe the manager, the lab manager, or the most experienced, or the Lord of the Ring will just come out and run the EQA. The EQA program should be selected and it should pass through all the process from the pre-analytical to the analytical and also the post-analytical. Now, the EQA program should not have any special treatment or any special selectivity. Once the EQA program, so if anyone who is competent enough to run any test, it should be competent enough to run an EQA program. Because the EQA program strengthens a whole lot of things, helps you to understand a lot of the processes. So another rule,
Because I love you.
another ground rule is every of your tests must have an EQA program. If there is no EQA program, you can register, you can participate, then you need to have an inter-laboratory comparison program, which is part of a proficiency test. Every test you do, I repeat, every, must have an EQA program or an inter-laboratory comparison. Are we communicating? So when selecting an EQA, look at these are the things to consider. Independently select the reference method and all these things. Set the overall consensus of data, set by method of peer group consensus, and set by panels of experts. So the EQA, when the EQA program is not available or not considered suitable, please, you have to look for alternative ways, like what I said, inter-laboratory comparison programs. Now, when the EQA is being done, the result or the feedback must be reviewed. Any EQA program that you fail, you have to review it. Review it, do a proper.
Can
you mute your mic? Please mute your mic, please. So the EQA, when the EQA fall outside the expected result, you have to review it, including whether because the assessment is the assessment has to be reviewed when there is failure in the EQA program. So anytime you fail any EQA program, whether inter-lab comparison or the EQA you enroll, you don't just pick it and say, oh, we are failing it next month. You have to do a corrective actions, and you have to implement that corrective actions and see if that corrective action is effective or not. So the process of reviewing has to be discussed in your technical meetings, and you have to have a documented evidence that it was discussed in your previous meeting. Such evidence can be your minutes of meeting, attendance, and etc. Are we communicating? Where it is determined that the impact is clinically significant, a review of the patient result that could have been affected and in need of the amendment shall be considered and advised as appropriately. And also expedient or wise that when you are reviewing your EQ program, you should also review your IQC, that's your daily quality controls, along that day. Because the ground rule is that you need to have done your IQC before running patient results. And so if the EQ has failure and the IQC is passing, then after you need to review them to see where the error or the issue lies. Hope you can hear me. So when either the different method or equipment or both are used for examination or performed at different sites, we're talking about comparability of examination method. A procedure for establishing the comparability of result of patient sample through the clinical significant interval shall be specified. Now, so let's say, for example, we'll talk about you're comparing the examination method when different method or equipment or both are used for an examination. Let's say, for example, you are in your lab, you are using a standard method or one equipment here, and you're using a lower equipment or another equipment in the other lab. You have to compare the results to see if there are significant differences. The laboratory shall record the result of the comparability performed and its accessibility. The laboratory shall periodically review the comparability of results. Where differences are identified, the impact of those differences on biological reference interval and clinical decision limit shall be evaluated and acted upon. The laboratory shall inform user or any clinically significant, if there's any clinically significant difference in comparability of results. So comparability of results is also a requirement. Are we communicating? So somebody read 7.4 for us. unmute your mic and read 7.4 for us. Okay. What are you going to read for us? Okay, Dr. Adedire, please read for us. 7.4 post-examination processes.
All right, good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
7.4 post-examination processes. 7.41 reporting of results. General. Examination results shall be reported accurately, clearly, unambiguously, and in accordance with any specific instructions in the examination procedure. The report shall include all available information necessary for the interpretation of the results. The laboratory shall have a procedure to notify users when examination results are delayed based on the impact of the delay on the patient. All information associated with issued reports shall be retained in accordance with the management system requirements. Then note, for the purposes of this document, reports can be issued as hard copies or by electronic means, provided that the requirements of these documents are met. 7.4.1.2 Results Review and Release. Results shall be reviewed and authorized prior to release. The laboratory shall ensure that authorized personnel review the results of examination and evaluate them against internal quality control and, as appropriate, available clinical information and previous examination results. Responsibilities and procedures for how examination results are released for reporting, including by whom and to whom, shall be specified.
Now,
I'm done.
yeah, so we're talking about reporting of results here. So, okay, what do you understand by what you read, the 7.4 on the document?
Yeah, firstly, it talks about how we are supposed to give our reports after our investigations in the laboratory. And like I read, it's been said that it has to be accurate and clear. And it should be so easy to be understood by the requesting physician so that there won't be any misunderstanding in the interpretation of the results. Then also, we must ensure that the result is authorized by the personnel that has been appointed by the facility before it is being released. And also, we must ensure that it is in consonance with the internal quality control measure that is on ground in such facility. I think that's all I can say for now. Thank you.
In addition, thank you. So the result has to be legible. The result shall be reviewed by authorized person prior to the release. So there should also be a document showing your authorized personnel for reviewing of results. So those people who have the authorization to release results, you should have a list of them. You should also have a proficiency, a competency for those who can verify a result. This is what this is actually saying. Now, when verifying the results, they should also be trained, because after training, they will have competency. So you can't just say, oh, you just have a list. Have a list of the people who can verify results. They also need to have a competency record. They also need to have been trained. When reviewing a result before you review, you don't just review a result, you have to review it based on also with the IQC as appropriate. So these are the, so you must have a procedure to notify the user when the examination results are delayed based on the impact of delay on the patient. Remember that three things gives account of the quality of what the lab result, the accuracy, reliability, and the timeliness of the result. So where they are going to be delayed, there are some of us will take time to ensure that results are ready, but the result does not get to the end user. So some results may be ready 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 week. The end user have not gotten that result, or there's a delay somewhere, or to sign it, to verify it. So all these things has to be addressed within what the system. It has to be as legible as possible. Critical result report. There are some clinical results. Use all that authorized person notified as soon as are relevant based on the clinical information available. Actions are taken and documented. So when you have critical results, those results should be released in accordance with the procedure. There are some that the result will need to be called out. Things like cardiac markers, maybe blood cultures, and some levels. So this has to be defined. And you need to have a procedure for handling what your critical results. Am I communicating? Those ones that needs to be called out, those ones that need to be emailed out. You have to have a procedure that best fits your organization for handling what critical results. Now, when results are, let's say for example, you're using an electronic way, the results should be both the verification of this examination result has to be done in this sensing. Let's say, for example, not everybody should have an access or authorization to release the result because they are using electronic means. So you should have a level of access, user access on the LIS that can make one to enter the result. One person can approve, next person can verify before those results can be released. All those procedures are very necessary, or else you see like a lot of transcription errors, a lot of misinterpretation of results, and etc. You can read this more. Every one of us have the soft copy of the ISO 151 document. You can print it, go through it. Or if I say you should go through it through the soft copy, some of us may find it lazy or maybe lazy, but so print a hard copy. Can use pencil, write on it? Some of all these things we are seeing things that needs to be done. Now, for automated selection review and release and reporting of results, when the laboratory implement a system for automated selection review, release, and reporting of results, it shall be established a procedure that ensures that the criteria for automated selection review and release are specified, approved, readily available, and understood by personnel responsible for authorizing the release of the result. The criteria are validated and approved before use, regularly reviewed and verified after changes to the reporting system that can affect their proper function, place patient care at risk. Results selected by automated reporting system for manual review shall be identified when necessary. When necessary, rapid suspension of automated selection, review and release and reporting should be applied. Let's say, for example, if there's a default in system whereby those level of access are no longer functioning, then you can stop it or suspend it pending when that is being resolved. Each report, so your lab report should carry the following. Please look at this slide very well. Unique patient identification, the date of primary sample collected, the date you issued the results. That date should be on each page of the report. Identification of the laboratory issuing the results, which lab is issuing the result. Name and other unique identifier of the user, type of the primary sample, clear, unambiguous identification of the examination performed, of the test that is done. Identification of examination method, where relevant. Let's say, for example, somebody comes for HIV testing. Person does not want to know whether it's rapid testing, P24, HIV combo you are using, or PCR or molecular. All you need to know whether it's positive or not. So if somebody comes for rapid testing, and the method should also be stated that, oh, this is rapid testing, and this is not what a PCR or a HP24 antigen that is being done. Are we communicating? Examination result where appropriate, the unit of measurement reported in SI unit, the unit traceable to the SI unit or other applicable units. If it's a test that have an SI unit, you have to put the SI unit and put the appropriate age and everything to correspond to that. Biological reference and clinical decision limit, likelihood of ratio and diagram, nomograms, supporting clinical decisions are necessary. We said we should list or table of all biological references can be distributed to the user of the lab. People you are like hospitals, you can send them your reference range, or you also put them alongside when you are releasing your results. So this is also applicable to POCT, just as I was saying. Now, next important information you need to know from this slide is amendment of reports. When you need to amend your report, you should have a procedure for amending report, or we call it reverse result. You want to reverse a result, or you want to amend a report. You don't just amend it and just you should have a procedure for amendment of results. So the reason for change should be recorded. Reverse the result that shall be delivered only, form of an additional document. So that reverse result should be delivered as an additional document to the original result. The user is made to be aware of the revision. The user lab or the user of that result, the end user must be aware that, oh, they have this result has been reviewed, or there's a revision, there's an amended copy. And most importantly, the amended copy should have the caption amended result or reversed result. So the record of both results has to be kept. You don't tear one or remove one from the system. Am I communicating? If you can hear me loud and clear, please type on the comment section that you can hear me. Someone is asking, when will this lecture end? Okay, lecture will end soon. Okay, thank you. So please, okay. So like when it comes to the post-examination handling of samples, you should have a procedure to an instruction for handling what? Your post-examination. How to store the samples, when additional request is being made, how to locate samples, retrieve sample, how to discard the sample appropriately. All these procedures must be captured in your post-analytical document or document for use. So 7.5 talks about non-conforming work. So you should have a procedure for handling non-conformance or any non-conformity. The responsibility of the authority of the management of non-conforming work are specified. Immediate and long-term actions are specified based on the risk analysis process established by the lab. Now, when there is a non-conforming work, so depending on the risk, sometimes you can stop the process, report when there is risk to patient. Let's say, for example, now a scientist refused to run an IQC, the quality control. That procedure should be hot. Or let's say, for example, there's no quality control material and there's no other form of other alternative. You can't keep releasing patient results because it's a risk to the patient, and which is a major non-conformance. An evaluation is made on the clinical significance of the non-conforming work, including the impact and analysis of the examination result, which could have been released prior to identification of the non-conformance. You have to make a decision on the acceptability of the non-conforming work. Where necessary, expected that you carry out a risk assessment and you do a corrective action corrective action for that. This is an example of a non-conformance or corrective action template. Here, you see, this is the lab, name of the lab, the area that is audited. The observation here is the non-conformance. So you classify whether it's a major non-conformance or a minor non-conformance. That will be classified by whoever is speaking the non-conformance. Now, non-conformance generally is any work, any procedure that is against the standard practice or the standard requirement. It's a non-conforming work. So you do a root cause analysis. So you do a root cause analysis. You can use, there are many ways of doing a root cause analysis, but I think I've explained one in this class. Using it, you can use the 5 why. Now, 5 why help you to dig deep to the real problem of the non-conformance, because the success of your root cause analysis will determine your corrective action. If you don't dig deep to the real root cause, you may end up not be able to solve the problem, or your corrective action will not be effective. So let's say, for example, okay, let me just give us an example of how to use the 5 why and analysis. Come. Let me give you an example on how to use the 5 why and analysis. I will communicating. So, example of the way to use the 5 why analysis. Let's say, for example, a test was not done. A test was not done. A patient came to collect his result, and test was not done. It's a non-conformance. True or false? Hello? A patient come for a
True.
test.
True, sir.
So now, let's do a root cause analysis on that. So using the 5 why analysis. 5 why analysis is a way of drilling down to the real problem. You asking questions about 5 times, the why 5. So why? The first one is that the test was not done. Okay. Why was the test not done? Now, someone can say, okay, the test was not done because the test was not done because there was no reagent. Are we communicating? So if there was no reagent, if you deal with the issue based on there was no reagent, you may not be dealing with the real issue, with the root of the issue. Now, the next question, why was the reagent not done? Why was the reagent not available? Okay, no, let's say, for example, now, the test was not done. That's, okay, let's say, no, the result, let's say the non-conformance is that the test result is not ready. So the question next one, the first why is that why was the test result not ready? Because the test was not done. Now, why was the test not done? I'm just giving an example. The why may the answer of the first why may change depending on the root cause analysis that is being done. Because when you are doing the root cause analysis, there should be a chronological representation of what actually happened to get, just like you're going to write a statement in the police like statement and like what really happened. So okay, when he asks why was the test not done? Why was the test not ready? Because the test was not done. Next question, why was the test not done? Oh, there was no reagent. So why was there no reagent? We were stuck out. Why were we stuck out? Oh, the orders were not placed for the reagent. Why was the order not placed? Oh, we are owing the vendors. Why are we owing the vendors? Because there is no, we have not paid, there is no cash, there's no fund. So you see that after drilling down, why the result was not ready was not because of what? It's not even an analytical problem. It's a lot of cash flow. So that means if there was cash, they would have paid the vendor. If they have paid the vendor, then the procurement would have been able to order. If they have ordered, then they would have supplied, and the scientists would have run the test, and the patient would have gotten their result. Am I communicating? So if you have treated the first why as the cause of it, you see that you will not get the right reason. So whatever corrective action you put in there will not be effective. Why? Because that is not the real root cause. So we put a corrective action. There's what we call remedial corrective actions. Immediate corrective action. Let's say, for example, someone is in your reception now, and the person breaks down, falls down. You won't say you want to go and be doing root cause analysis and be doing documentation. You have to do an action. You can pick the person who change the chair. Those actions are called what? The immediate corrective actions, remedial actions. They put the corrective actions. They sign it as an example of a non-conformance corrective action, the clearance template. Am I communicating? Does it sound interesting? Please type on the comment section if it sounds interesting. Sure, yeah, okay. Then the other person, does it sound interesting to you? Or you don't understand what we are saying? It is interesting, okay? Yes, it sounds interesting. It doesn't just sound interesting, it's actually interesting. Okay? Don't worry, we'll round up. Just give us a few time. I know we started a little bit late. So 7.6 talks about control of data and information management. So this has to do with managing our informations. So whether it is paper-based or computer-based, we have to, well, most of these things that I discussed here has to do with computer-based laboratory information system. So authorities and responsibility of the information management, the lab shall ensure that the authorities and responsibility of for managing information system are specified, including maintenance, modification of the information system that can affect patient care. Laboratory is ultimately responsible for the laboratory information system. Now, the system used for collection, processing, recording, reporting, storage, and retrieval of examination data and information shall be validated by the supplier and verified for functionality by the lab before it is introduced. Any changes to this system, including laboratory software configuration or modification to commercially off-the-shelf software, shall be authorized, documented, and validated before what? Implementation. So you don't just get software and start using. You have to ensure that it meets your use. Am I communicating? Document and the documentation readily available to authorized users, including that for the day-to-day functioning of the system. Implemented taking cybersecurity into account to protect the system from unauthorized access and safeguarding data against tamper or loss. I remember one of the places I was working there during COVID. They stole the COVID data laptop, and people have to hack into the portal to start generating NCDC reports. You have to ensure that these things are well protected. Operate in an environment that complies with the supplier specification of that software. In case of non-computerized system, provide conditions where safeguard the accuracy of the manual recording and the transcription of those words, of those information. You know, this has to do with the information management, which has to do with the 12 quality system essential. So what this whole procedure, what this whole manual or this standard talks about is it spread the 12 quality system essential and the lab process across these 5 main clauses. Now, maintain in a manner that ensures the integrity of the data and information and include the recording of system failures and appropriate immediate and corrective actions. Calculation and data transfer shall be checked in an appropriate and systematic manner. And so your laboratory information management system has to be a system that meets your needs. There should be protection, security. There should be a whole lot of things that ensure that that information is protected. You can easily retrieve those information. It's user friendly and it works for you. So this is an example of a laboratory information management system. This is an Easy Lab product. There's Easy Medical, Easy Lab, Easy Imaging, Easy Dent Medical. There are a lot of different laboratory information management system, and also part of the health tech. So it's something that is interesting, something that can also give you a good fortune if you know how to design, you know how to implement, you know how to design, you know how to program a whole lot of things, and the rest. It is actually interesting and it makes life better. It helps to manage your quality system. We want to talk about it, it helps to gather the information from the pre-analytical to the post-analytical. It also will help you to reduce errors, whereby instead of you typing your result manually, the equipment can transmit. You can use through the barcode system. You can scan the barcode and after programming it at the pre-analytical session, automatically pick the test. The equipment can automatically pick the test that should be done. And when the test is done, analyzed, transmit it back to the airlines without you having to type, which can save a whole lot of people. Imagine you typing a full block count result one after the other. You know how long it will take. But this airlines, different airlines can transmit it back for bi-directional connection, can transmit it back to you in less than 10 to 10 seconds. So these are these. So in case you need any of the airlines, please do well to contact me. We have installed over 15 of them in different countries and different towns in Nigeria and outside Nigeria. So 7.64 talks about downtime plans. So you should have a contingency plan to manage your downtime. That's all I would say for that because of time. Off-site management. When the laboratory information manages and manage and maintain off-site to an external provider, the laboratory shall ensure that the provider or the operator of the system complies with all applicable requirements of this document. Now, 7.7 talks about what? Complaint. So you should have a way of resolving your complaint. Now, how do you resolve your complaint? You have a documented procedure for handling complaint. Now, you should have a complaint resolution document. Take record of the complaint, address the complaint, put corrective action to the complaint, and also ensure that the complaint is closed. So to every complaint that is raised in the lab, the auditor wants to see, or they want to see where the complaint has been managed, information has been analyzed, and that complaint has been closed. Resolution of complaint. You have to investigate and you have to take action of that for that complaint, and you have to close that complaint. The last but not the least talks about 7.8 continuity and emergency preparedness planning. So the laboratory shall ensure the risks associated with emergency situation or under condition when the laboratory activities are limited or unavailable or have been identified, and a coordinated strategy exists that involves planning, procedures, technical measurement to enable continued operation after a disruption. Plans shall be periodically tested and plan response capability exercise where practicable. The laboratory shall establish a plan process for emergency situation, take into action the need and capability of all relevant personnel, provide information and training as appropriate to the relevant laboratory personnel, respond to actual emergency situations. So how you achieve this is that first you need to have a emergency preparedness plan for your lab. You need to have an emergency preparedness team. Then you also need to have appropriate tools. Then when there's an emergency, you also need to do risk assessment. So things that can cause potential harm can be identified and mitigated. Now, when there's an emergency, then you also have to do training for the emergency preparedness team to be able to handle emergency and put plans to action where there are emergencies. Let's say, for example, now there's an outbreak of maybe one disease or something within the lab. Let's say, for example, there's even a hospital infection and every people are coming down with a particular thing. So the emergency preparedness team will put measure to contain, to mitigate what the effect of what those emergencies. Okay, note 2, you will need to have a non-conformance form, corrective action template. You can have an LIS, a manual-based or electronic ELIS preferable. SOP for all your testing procedure, including quality control protocols. SOP for result verification, amendment of report, EQA, IQC, and daily quality control review document. You have to have a proficiency testing protocol. You have to have validation manual, template, and SOP. Then you also need to have a contingency plan document. Thank you, but please just give me a minute.